What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to SK Wealth Academy podcast number 140. Now, I'm going for the nondescript Edward Snowden-like background because I am going to make another call for people to stand up and fight, because we're at that fork in the road whereby we're forever going to lose our freedoms, or we stand up and fight together and regain our freedoms. Because I've heard from so many of my friends recently, oh, don't worry, things will get better. Things will be better in a month. Like I've heard that since March. Or, some people will say, oh, things are going to be back to normal in 2021. So that's the whole problem, right, with that kind of mentality, is that, number one, we should have never lost our so-called normal, right? We should never have given up our normal, because there is no scientific reason for us to give up what is our normal lives, none whatsoever. And one thing I want to discuss, and this might be one of my few last podcasts, because I'm like right here at that tipping point myself. I'm like at that breaking point. So every system is defined by the results it produces. And it's completely ignorant, completely intellectually dishonest to claim the opposite. And I keep hearing that. And it makes me want to punch people in the face. And like I said, I'm not violent. In 99.9% of situations, I'm not going to be violent. But if I see like a pedophile with a little kid, I will go break that person's legs and ribs. Or if someone tries to murder me or anyone I love, I will happily murder that person first. So the results produced by the system are intended, and the purpose of that system, whether it exists at the national, regional, or municipal level. And so it's foolish of us to continually state, oh, this is outrageous, oh, that is outrageous. No, it's just when pointing out unjust consequences of what is going on right now. The system that's specifically designed to be unjust. So the thing that blows my mind is that so many people out there can't understand when they express their outrage about certain unjust things in the system, like, oh, this is so un-American, or this is so un-Australian, or whatever nation they live in, is because when they speak about a system that has been churning out the unjust results for 5 consecutive years or decades, or sometimes even for centuries. So it's outrageous for people to express outrage at the system, saying this is not what my country's about, or this is not what my system is about. That's exactly what your system is about. It's exactly what your country is about. For example, the US, we've always heard for decades people state certain things are un-American, so un-American. We need to fix this because it contradicts American ideals. What the hell does that mean? Obviously, it doesn't contradict American ideals, and obviously it's not American because it's existed for years, if not decades, and like I said, if not centuries. So if that condition has persisted in America for at least a couple of years, then the unjust condition is entirely American. It's the most American thing that can be, because it's part of what defines America. So it may conflict with that person's ideals of what America should be, and it may certainly be unjust, it may be unconstitutional, but it's certainly not un-American, because that very existence for years defines what America is. So, for example, Ronald Reagan, former US president in the 1980s, I believe. This is a quote. He said, quote, "Our federal tax system is, in short, utterly impossible, utterly unjust, and completely counterproductive. It says it reeks with injustice and is fundamentally un-American. It has earned a rebellion, and it's time we rebelled." End quote. And he said that in 1983, May of 1983. And here we are, more than what? 37 years later, or actually, 17 years would be 2000. Yeah, 37. And then 2020, another 20. 37 years later, and Americans have done nothing. So what does this say about the spirit of justice in America? We had a US president saying it's totally un-American, and I would argue even that statement was incorrect. That it's the federal tax system that President Ronald Reagan said was utterly unjust, completely counterproductive, reeks with injustice, fundamentally un-American. I would argue was everything before the un-American statement was correct, utterly unjust, reeks with injustice, completely counterproductive. But instead of saying fundamentally un-American, he should have said fundamentally American. You know why? Because that federal tax system had been in place ever since the inception of the U.S. Central Bank in 1913. So how can you say that something that has existed for 71 years and has been a critical part of the backbone of America for 71 years is un-American? That's about as American as you can get. And here's the other thing that people should know, because people have this misconception of Google not being like an evil corporation that it is. If you Google Ronald Reagan taxes un-American, right? Because that's how much more direct can you be in what you're searching for. The very first result should come up as far as Ronald Reagan's Grace Commission and his response to the Grace Commission, which is that quote. But Google buries it. You can't even find that Ronald Reagan quote in the whole entire first page of their search results. They want to censor. They don't completely censor, because you keep searching on the next page, you will find what you're looking for. But most people, the way Google is used, other studies have shown that 95% of people don't even look beyond the first third of the page, of the top page of the first page of results. So if had they search for this, they're going to say, oh, Ronald Reagan never even said that. It's not showing up on the Google results. So if you think Google is un-American for pushing the top match, the best match, the most accurate match, most factual match out of its first page of results, then you're not hearing what I am saying. Because Google, seated by the US Defense Department, is about an American as a company can get. So the fact that their search results consistently push the best search results, the most factual search results out of their first page, because it doesn't fit with their control the population narrative, that's the exact intention of their engineered search algorithms. Because the results are exactly what it is intended to be. They're intended to deceive you, intended to dumb you down, intended to make you a slave. So you don't understand the truth. So you can't, before I move on, I just want to make the final point. You can't call a system that was enforced in a nation for 71 years un-American. Because there are three things that are certain about life in America: taxes, death, and taxes on your wealth upon death. So there was only 1 year in America in which the state taxes were completely waived, which is another word for that is the death tax, because you can't leave 100% of the fruits of your hard work for your entire lifetime to your kids, if you have kids, or to other family members. The government will tax your wealth upon death. So that's known as the estate tax, but some people just call it the death tax. There was only 1 year which there was no death tax. And I believe President Bush was the one that actually suspended that death tax for 1 year in 2001. So that's the only way, if you're American, you could have left 100% of your wealth to your kids. But then you would have to, commit suicide if you wanted to do it in 2001. Because if you did, you can't plan when you're going to die. So if you didn't die in 2001, the very next year, 2002, the death tax came back. So, again, the second example I want to go into is you will hear all the time people say, oh, look at the state of surveillance in America. That's un-American. But how long has that been going on? That's been going on since a Patriot Act was passed after 9/11 in 2001. So that's 2 decades. You can't say that the invasion of privacy, for which Americans criticize China for all the time, when their own government does it to every single citizen in America. Because every single American that is not completely off the grid, that means every single American that owns a smartphone, all your phone conversations have been monitored. We know that because of Edward Snowden and WikiLeaks. And we know all your online behavior is constantly surveilled. You can't escape it. Everything, in fact, that you do on Gmail downloads everything, all your purchase history. They categorize it and they store it. So unconstitutional surveillance of citizens is about as an American undertaking as apple pie in baseball. So again, for people that detest the constant state of invasion of privacy by constant surveillance, you can't state that behavior does not define the very nation that is deploying it, because by doing so, other people that may move to America will be in for a very rude awakening after hearing so many people say, oh, look, this constant surveillance state, that's all something that only countries like China does, and that's really un-American. They're going to move to America thinking that that's not done. And that if it were, that every American citizen would fight it, only to arrive to discover every single citizen is bowing down and complying to these surveillance tactics. Now, the third thing I want to cover is systemic racism among law enforcement, whether that's in the United States or in Australia against the Aboriginal population. Again, many people say, oh, there's no systemic racism in law enforcement because they're part of the dominant culture. And they'll say the reason there's no systemic racism among law enforcement is they'll say, oh, I know a lot of good cops, and the majority of cops are not bad cops. Well, this depends on how you define good cops. Is a good cop someone that sees a fellow cop doing something wrong and remains silent? Because there are a ton of cops like that. And secondly, people of color know that the number of rogue cops that unnecessarily use excessive force and shoot and murder people, but are never prosecuted, never go to jail, are always just shuffled around and end up in a different municipality committing the same repugnant acts. Even people of color that live in communities where this stuff happens frequently knows that this is committed by what they call bad apples, rogue cops, that the majority of cops are not like that. However, there is something in America called qualified immunity, which police officers are immune from lawsuits due to negligence, failure to exercise due care, and they are not subject to any lawsuits, even when unreasonable conduct, excessive force that might have resulted in a murder happens. Nothing can happen to them. They're protected because of qualified immunity. So if you're a serial killer, the best way to legally murder people in America is to become a cop, because you're not going to be prosecuted. You can just happily go around murdering people all the time if you get your rocks off from doing that, as serial killers do. So an officer can merely claim, even if a lawsuit is brought against them because of this qualified immunity law that protects the repugnant immoral behavior, that the reason he was so negligent and used excessive force, which resulted in this person dying, was because he felt, oh, my life was threatened. That's all they have to say. I felt my life was in danger and threatened. And then the slate will be wiped clean. So because there are laws that allows a so-called bad cop to persist and not even lose their job, that is a systemic problem. Furthermore, regarding my own personal experiences, I've had about 12 direct experiences with cops in America while living there. Not every single experience initiated by the cops. Some were initiated by me. One time when my home was robbed. Second time when me and my friend were walking down the street in Philly and saw someone jack in a car. And we informed 2 cops, still walking the beat on the street. Every single instance was negative. And again, like I said, even I realized that 100% of my experiences with cops were negative. I know it's only a small percentage of them, but this is the point. Since every single interaction I had was bad, you can't even use the excuse that a lot of people will use, right? They'll say, oh, you just had experience with 12 jerk-off cops, and all cops are not like that. And I know that's true, but the point is, like I said, not every experience was initiated by cops. Some were initiated by myself. So that proves systemic racism is a problem among U.S. law enforcement, because most of the people of color I know, with the exception of Asian females that lived in California for some reason, whenever I spoke to Asian females that lived in California, I don't know if cops there have yellow fever, they didn't seem to have negative experiences with cops. But every other person of color that was of the male gender, whether Latino, Asian, Black, all had stories of negative experiences with cops. And the majority of their experiences were negative experiences. So just because the dominant culture, like a white person in America, has experiences in which the majority of their interactions are positive with law enforcement, trust me, the majority interactions of the majority of people of color with law enforcement in America are negative. So this projection of one's experiences as a norm onto people of color is invalid, is a dominant culture, is never the target demographic of racist cops. So in Massachusetts, for example, there was actually a judge that asked Harvard University to conduct a study to figure out why so many black people are in prison. Again, I'll put these studies in the show notes below. And they said there was only one answer, and it was systemic racism within the U.S. law enforcement system. Because according to 2016 data from the Massachusetts Sentencing Commission, they said 655 of every 100,000 black Americans in Massachusetts were in prison. And they said, comparatively speaking, of 100,000 white Americans who resided in Massachusetts, only 82 were in jail. So, in other words, 8 times more black people per capita were in jail in Massachusetts than white people. And nationwide, you may think, wow, that's a massive disparity. Nationwide, it's almost the same rate. It's 6 times as many. So there is a Supreme Judicial Court Chief Justice that said, hey, we need to take a hard look at this to see if we're actually providing equal justice to every American citizen, regardless of the color of their skin. And Harvard, in their study, concluded that the only thing that led to this massive gap in the amount of black people in jail in Massachusetts and white people was not what you hear quite often as an argument from the dominant culture in America. They say, oh, that only means that black people are thugs and they commit more crime. The study showed, no, that's not the case. Then they say, oh, well, maybe they go to jail because they commit more violent crimes, right? And again, Harvard study found that was not the case. What they found, I'm going to tell you right now, which every person of color knows because I'm not a violent person, and I was stopped many, many times in America and pulled over by racist cops for doing nothing, not violating any laws, not committing any traffic violations, just pulled over, made to put my hands against the car, patted down, searched for no reason than to harass me. So what they found is that the criminal justice system was unequal, they said, on every single level. They said cops in Massachusetts were more likely to stop citizens in Massachusetts for DWB, driving while black, than white residents. They said they're more likely to charge black people with infractions that carry worse penalties. They're less likely to offer black Americans plea bargains or pretrial interventions than white Americans in Massachusetts arrested for the exact same offense. And they said judges in Massachusetts sentenced black defendants to longer terms in prison than white defendants that committed the exact same crime. And not only that, they concluded that the average white felon in the Massachusetts Department of the DOC, Department of Corrections, committed more severe crimes than the average black inmate. So they actually concluded that white inmates that were part of the DOC in Massachusetts were more violent than the black inmates. And they said they only concluded it's because the cops were racist. They said the cops believed black people were criminals, so that's why they constantly interrogated them, stopped them, frisked them, arrested them, searched them. It was because of their personal racist biases. So let's move on to, is this the fourth thing? I can't remember. I think this is the fourth thing that's going on right now, in which people, I'm so tired of people saying, oh, this is not systemic. This is not our nation. This is not what our country is about. This is not what, yeah, it is. And that's the economic lockdowns that's going on all over the world. Because I'm so tired of people saying it's going to be over soon. Don't worry, you're going to get back to normal. Because again, we should never have to be at the state we are in today, where we're being provided with this false hope we're going to return back to normal, because none of us should have ever accepted our freedoms being stripped from us in the first place. Because, like, I've covered this point actually a million times, because there's so many famous quotes people quote all the time that these people never said. Of course, because the internet spouts so much BS that people believe it. So I actually didn't do the research for this podcast to actually find documentation that Benjamin Franklin, who's like a historical American figure, actually said this. But even if he didn't say this, doesn't matter, because the statement's still valid. So I don't know if he actually said this, but it's actually something that Americans repeat all the time when they talk about liberties being stripped from us. They'll say, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Now, I don't know if he actually said that, but that's certainly a true statement, because years ago, I remember after 9/11, when the government went ham, they developed a new Department of Homeland Security, passed a Patriot Act, instituted legal molestation at airports with Transportation Security Authority agents, TSA agents. I remember watching a video of a 10-year-old girl that was being patted down on her chest and on her butt, and it went viral. And the 10-year-old girl said, I was very, 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 very angry when that happened. And there was a show in America called Good Morning America, in which a TV personality, like a former NFL player, Michael Strahan, went full idiot, because he was asked, hey, is this something that you support? Because it's really a controversial topic. And he said, oh, this is the price we have to pay for safety. And he was asked by like another one of his other TV personalities, well, you have children, would you let the TSA agents do this? And they said, oh, if this is what we need to do to be safe, then it's okay. That's what TSA agents need to do. They need to feel up my child inappropriately, touch her private parts, touch her chest. I'm okay with it. So, of course, the children don't deserve to be molested because their idiot father is okay with it, but that idiot Strahan deserves to have his freedom stripped at some point in the future, or have a mob show up at his home when things get worse, because he was a personality there supporting this cycle of cowardly compliance that is leading to the full destruction of liberties that's going on right now, 5 to 10 years later, or whenever that incident happened, in which he said, oh yeah, TSA agents should be able to sexually molest little kids at the airport. So even with economic lockdowns, even Aussies cannot say lockdowns are un-Australian just because not all of their states are enforcing the most draconian policies and following those of Aussie Premier Daniel Andrews that he's imposed in their state of Victoria. Because every Australian state has still enforced some form of completely unnecessary economic lockdowns that have imposed unnecessary economic suffering and great hardships on every single Australian citizen living in every single state in Australia as a national policy. Because this is a national policy, though, imposed with differing degrees of austerity in different states, but that is a part of the national identity of Australia, because it's imposed on every single Australian state. So to say that these economic lockdowns when I hear Australian citizens saying this is not what we're about, this is un-Australian, it's very Australian because it's going on in every single state. And unless one state, at least one state, you have one state in which all citizens rise up and overthrow the government in that state, the regional government, your regional state government, and re-seize your freedoms, is very American, because none of you are all rising up in unity. And I guarantee this nationwide compliance to these economic lockdowns, though, like I said, in different states of tyranny that are being rolled out and reinforced, and also will still be, because even in states outside of Victoria, other political and health organization leaders are saying this is just the beginning, meaning that they fully intend to keep locking down Australian citizens next year, 2021. Because they're stating, like just as of last month or 2 months ago, this is just the beginning of this pandemic. So you are basically ensuring that as a lead country for this new world order, that you are going to be the first citizens in the entire world, this is what I'm predicting, that are subjected. I thought it was going to be India first because Modi's kind of a snake in India, but I really think it's going to be Australia now, not India, in which 100% digital, a national digital money law is going to be rolled out in Australia, which will complete the exercise in citizen compliance, because when that happens, think things are bad now as far as police coming into your home and arresting you just for posting protests on Facebook. It's going to become 100 times worse, because you do something like that, 100% national digital money, guess what? Access to all your money is going to be switched off and you'll be out on the streets, homeless and starving. So, you know, politicians today are engaging in the same garbage that Atlantic magazine engaged in back in 2012 when they put U.S. Central Bank Chairman Ben Bernanke on their cover with a disingenuous and false label of hero. They call him a hero for his response taken in reaction to the 2008 global financial crisis, in which he literally gave more than $29 trillion to bankers. He stole that money from the citizens, gave it to the bankers when those bankers should have gone bankrupt, and engaged in one of the largest wealth transferences in modern history of stealing money from the people and giving it to the bankers. And for that, the Atlantic magazine repugnantly called Ben Bernanke a hero. And even today, right now, September 2020, we've yet to glimpse the full fallout of Bernanke's action. It hasn't come home to fully roost yet, but it will. And when it does, I guarantee you, the global dire circumstances that will force martial law in the entire world. That's why they're, experimenting with this economic lockdowns using COVID-19, a non-lethal virus, as an excuse to do so. A virus that scientifically has been proven as of right now not to be any more dangerous than the common flu. They're using it as an excuse because to enforce more learned helplessness, more compliance in the global population. So when they have to ratchet up their martial law, when the entire global financial system falls apart, which is going to happen because Ben Bernanke put it in place for the last 13 years, that when this thing starts crumbling, we saw the start of that at the very start of 2020. It's going to be far more devastating than what happened in 2008. We're going to have complete chaos in the world, and that is going to create as a consequence even greater lockdowns that are happening right now. And we had this idiot Governor Wolf in the state of Pennsylvania that wants to take claim just like he wants to be a hero, even though he's an anti-hero like Ben Bernanke. He's a villain. He wants to say, I saved thousands of lives with my draconian lockdowns in the state of Pennsylvania. And again, because when I read these articles, sometimes I look at the comments, you have complete idiots. You had someone comment in Pennsylvania, government Wolf's restrictions save thousands of lives in Pennsylvania. So they said, you cannot open up the state of California. Didn't you see that headline? The headline just told us the lockdown saved thousands of lives in Pennsylvania, so why would you want to open up and let people be free now? These are the kinds of idiots that reside in Pennsylvania. And you know what these thousands of lives saved claims come from? It comes from, it's total garbage. There's zero science behind those claims. It comes from, I'll tell you it's going to come from. It comes from these models that have been proven to be grossly, absurdly, obscenely inaccurate, that were funded by, of course, Bill Gates and the Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation, in which they gave millions and millions of dollars to like Imperial College in the UK, and I think it was a university in the state of Washington in America. And these two colleges that Bill Gates gave millions of dollars to perform these modeling studies of the virus gave all these absurd predictions. They predicted 3.2 million people would die from COVID by May 4th. And because 3.2 million, the media is not saying, look how absurd that prediction was. We should never listen to these stupid, idiotic scientists. I don't even know if they actually have real science degrees. These researchers that do this viral modeling, they may actually have zero scientific background. They're maybe just statisticians that Bill Gates gives money to fearmonger as much as possible, to say millions of people are going to die if we don't lock down. And then because they didn't, now they're claiming, I've seen the BBC put out stories saying lockdowns in Europe saved millions of lives. No, it didn't. It's your stupid modeling studies funded by Bill Gates that were completely absurd and obscenely wrong. And you can't say because that didn't happen that the lockdowns were responsible for saving. And that's exactly what Governor Wolf in Pennsylvania in America did as well. He said, look at what these modelings are saying. I saved all these lives. No, the modeling studies were completely absurdly and obscenely wrong. So like I said, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation donated more than 184 million pounds to the Imperial College of London, who came up with these absurd modeling. At the beginning of the year, they said 2.2 million people in America were going to be dead from the virus by the end of this year. 1.5 million people, they said, were going to be dead in England by the end of this year, because it didn't. Now the media is saying, oh, look, the lockdown saved millions of people from dying, which is totally absurd because they're just making stuff up. There's zero scientific basis for their claims of saving millions of people. It's only the most foolish of the idiots that believe these headlines. And it's also the most idiotic of the idiots that believe these measures are only temporary, because they're only going to become more restrictive, more suffocating, more reprehensible, more life-threatening, more misery-inducing next year. And the result of all these narratives is this is not what our country is all about. It should be, this is exactly what our country is all about, until the people rise up and stand up and re-seize their freedoms. This is exactly what is all this leading to? It's leading to self-censorship. So congratulations, because on top of the parasitic ruin class, because on top of your deliberately and artificially created elevated levels of anxiety, depression, drug use, alcoholism, suicide rates are skyrocketing, learned helplessness. Now people are voluntarily stripping themselves of freedom of speech because they're too cowardly to stand up and for what they believe is right. Because a recent survey of the Cato Institute of 2,000 Americans found that 62% of Americans say they don't say the things they believe in because, quote, others might find them offensive. What cowards. 62%. And then the article went on to say, strong liberals stood out the most for being willing to express their beliefs, because 58% of them, that's barely half, more than half, 58% said they will say what they believe. So this article was lauding them. Look at these liberals, strong liberals. Just barely more than half of them are willing to stand up for what they believe in. That's like pathetic. It's not something to laud, that's pathetic. But I want to leave you on a hopeful note. So I don't want to leave you on a negative note, even though the world is very dark and very bleak right now. Because every day I'm turning to my faith to help me get me through this. Because I don't know where this is going. I don't know where this is personally going for me. But I pray that the answers, the right, correct answers will come to me. But let me leave you on a hopeful note. The first federal judge in all of America, a judge in Pennsylvania, yeah, my home state, ruled in mid-September that Governor Wolf, the person that praised himself for saving thousands of people's lives, even though it's total garbage and BS, he ruled that Governor Wolf's lockdown orders were entirely unconstitutional for violating both the First Amendment and the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So he said the governor's stay-at-home orders and mandatory closures of businesses that were deemed non-essential. Of course, that's why the parasitic billionaires gained nearly $500 billion of wealth, because the government would say Walmart is essential. Walmart, for non-Americans watching this, if you don't know, is like a big retail outlet store. But they said all the other mom and pop shops and small businesses that sell the exact same things as Walmart, their businesses are non-essential. But Walmart's essential. So Walmart made all the money while all the mom and pop and small businesses were shut down, and the lives of those owners that own these small businesses are forever ruined. So this federal judge said that Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf's orders that were implemented in conjunction with the Snake Health Secretary Rachel Levine violated constitutional liberties of American citizens. And they said that they infringed on citizens' freedoms and discriminated based upon arbitrary life-sustaining and non-life-sustaining standards, and therefore were in violation of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So this Judge Stickman, he said, this is where I completely disagree with him, though, although I 100% wholeheartedly endorse his striking down of Governor Wolf's lockdowns as unconstitutional. He said he believed the defendants, meaning that snake Rachel Levine, as well as Pennsylvania Governor Wolf, undertook their actions in a well-intentioned effort to protect Pennsylvanians from the virus. However, good intentions toward a laudable end are not alone enough to uphold governmental action against a constitutional challenge. Indeed, the greatest threats to our system of constitutional liberties may arise when the ends are laudable and the intent is good, especially in a time of emergency, end quote. So that's where I totally disagree with the judge, because I don't agree that the governors and the health commissioner, Rachel Levine's intentions were good, were honorable. I believe they're very dishonorable. I believe they were done for political gain, to show their allegiance to the parasitic ruling class to get ahead. And I believe their intentions were evil. So that's where I disagree. Because, like I said, the very results of whatever system is put in place, and that includes these economic lockdowns, are the intended results, are the desired results. So all this stuff is like, all these the suffering and misery and unemployment and shutdown of small businesses all over America. Those are unintended. We really were trying to protect the health of the people. Come on. How naive can we be to believe that garbage? Including, I'm going to indict that federal judge that did the right thing for being so gullible and naive to think that they actually intended to do the right thing. They're intending to do the right thing for selfish reasons to further their political careers, but they wholly intended to do the wrong thing for the citizens they're supposed to serve. So that wraps up. So let me know what you think of the comments in this particular podcast. Please do like, comment, subscribe below. As always, remain intensely curious. I send good vibes and blessings to all of you. Hope all of you stay strong. And Rise up and take part in the defiance. It's time to rise or die. Take care.